and we'll do it live. We'll do it live. So today's topic is the KALERGI plan and how Trump was catapulted into the White House in 2015 by a global network of internet racists. You don't want to hear that history, especially if you're Donald Trump. But that's what happened. How come nobody wants to know what happened? Let's just take a look at how this all started. It started with a website called The Daily Stormer, and it started with a politician called, a British politician called, what was his name? British BNP. What was his name? BNP. British National Party. British National Party. British National Party. Nick Griffin. Nick Griffin. BNP Nick Griffin. This is how it all started. This is how Trump became the president. I'm going to tell you right now. So you don't know this story because you weren't there. I was there. I know what happened. Nick Griffin. Okay, so before Trump said that he wanted to be the president, before he came down the escalator, we were already having a major program in internet land to get information out to people. And Nick Griffin was a British politician over in, he was actually, he was in the European Union as a member of the European Parliament. So here's a video of, this is what started it. Nick Griffin calls out the KALERGI plan. Member of European Parliament and ex-BNP head Nick Griffin. This is because this was posted in 2020, but this is from a speech that he gave in the Parliament, in the European Union Parliament, way back before Trump got elected. So hopefully I can hear what he has to say here.
The European Union, Richard Coutan of KALERGI, published the plan for a united Europe and the ethnocide of the peoples of Europe. The encouragement of mass non-white immigration was central to the plot. Since then, an unholy alliance of leftists, capitalists, and Zionist supremacists has schemed to promote immigration and miscegenation with the deliberate aim of breeding us out of existence in our own homelands. As indigenous resistance to this human genetic modification industry grows, the criminal elite seeks new ways to camouflage their project. First, their immigrant pawns were temporary guest workers. Then it was a multiracial experiment. Then they were refugees. Then the answer to a shrinking population. Different excuses, different lies. And asylum is just another one. But the real aim stays the same. The biggest genocide in human history. The final solution of the Christian European problem. This crime demands a new set of Nuremberg trials, and you people will be in the dock.
Mr. President, I'm really ashamed of the racist and xenophobic terms that were used by Mr. Griffin. And my only question to him is if he dared to make any concrete suggestions and amendments to the legislation. Is your policy serious, or are you just shouting? And I hope you will not be re-elected if you seek re-election, because it's a shame for this parliament, the kind of statements you have just made.
Mr. Griffin. It's you that's shouting, because obviously the truth hurts. Yes, I will be seeking re-election. Yes, I hope to return here to speak up for the indigenous Europeans, which the founder of this place has deliberately set out to wipe out, because that is a crime. I'm telling the truth. I have a constructive suggestion to help those poor asylum seekers from Africa. Yes, make it clear they can't come here, so they don't try to cross the sea and drown in huge numbers. The best way for them is to get the banks off the backs of their countries so they can live in peace in their countries, and we Europeans can live in peace in ours. Thank you.
That's Nick Griffin. So he gave that speech. When was that? When was he a member of Parliament? Nick Griffin, MEP. When was that? When did he serve as a member of Parliament? Okay, so chairman of the British National Party. Okay, so his chairmanship ended in 2014. Following this, he was president of the BNP between July 2014 when he was expelled from the party. He was expelled from the party in 2014. Gotcha. So this was 2014. That was right after he gave that speech in the European Parliament. A little while later, he was eventually expelled from the party. I don't know that had anything to do with it, but there's always a lot of infighting and problems in these types of political parties because they are so easily infiltrated and subverted by people seeking to subvert them through usually through MI6 or through the CIA or some other organization like the FBI. But anyway, we're not talking about that today. We're talking about the speech that he just gave that I just played for you at the European Parliament. And if you notice, so that was before 2014. So let's say that was 2013-ish, around 2013. Let's say he gave that speech, I believe. Could have been a little earlier than that. That was when things broke out on the internet. See, because he mentioned the KALERGI program. Before that, nobody was talking about the KALERGI program. Before that, practically nobody knew about the KALERGI program. And so this changed the conversation. This changed the conversation because if you notice, he's speaking in there about how they always have different excuses for why they're bringing all these people in, right? There's always a different reason. But the real reason has always been the ethnocide of the European people. That was always the real reason. And so that this program was being carried out in Europe and also in America or anywhere where there were European people living. This is the program that's being carried out. And it's called the KALERGI program. And so when we got a hold of this information spread like the gospel. It spread like the gospel through certain channels on the internet. This is way before Trump said he was going to be the president. This was back in 2014, 2013, 2014. So it was actually more like, I would say it was actually 2012. Yeah, I remember now. 2012, 2013 into 2014. Then Trump announces his presidency, I think 2015 or 2014, 2015, right? So back in 2012 and 2013 and 2014, we had a global network, and we had discovered this KALERGI program. And when we discovered this KALERGI program, we pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed this particular agenda on every channel across the internet. Every channel across the internet. And this is what changed the conversation. This is what finally changed the conversation. Was this information. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the KALERGI program. It's funny because there's quite a bit of information about it. And it's interesting how they try to cover it up. You know, how the now it looks like the BNP is still talking about this. This is interesting. Let's see what they say. So they have their website here. Okay, yeah, this is interesting. So the BNP has bnp.org UK. They're still around. Coudenhove KALERGI, how tolerance means genocide. Everyone knows that the plan to build the United States of Europe included I have to read the whole article. I don't want to mess up my computer. So they know what they're talking about here. They use an important term, the United States of Europe. Where does that come from? That comes from a Masonic document that I actually have in my possession and posted in the Internet Archives or archive.is. Archive.is. You can find it there. Is that what it's called? Oh, yeah. Archive. Masonic Forum number 27. Masonic Forum. This is European Union and Freemasonry. The premise of the ideas of the European Union. And so this is written by Marianne Mihaila, PhD, assistant to the Grand Master of the National Grand Lodge of Romania. Anyway, they wrote an article and posted it on their website. And it says here, after World War I, the idea of a European federation was taken up again by Count KALERGI, particularly in the work Pan-Europe, in which he foresaw the constitution of a European federation based on sovereignty limits accepted by the European states. In order to get this project into practice and to act upon the public opinion, the Count KALERGI, created under his patronage a movement entitled the Pan-European Union, an outcome of a Congress held in Vienna in 1926. Among the conditions for success of this reunion, the agreement between Germany and France stands out. Okay, so anyway, I'm not going to read you the whole article, but this is the idea behind the European Union. The idea behind the European Union was what was called the United States of Europe. And so what is all this stuff? What is the United States of Europe? What is the KALERGI plan? Why did they come up with this? Who came up with this? Well, this is obviously the Masonic. This article that I was just reading to you was from a Masonic lodge. So, and KALERGI was a Freemason, and the Freemason lodge was the infrastructure used to bring a lot of this about. A lot of what? A lot of the New World Order, we could call it, the New Republican Order. And the New Republican Order, of course, started in Washington, D.C. with the revolution against the King of England. And it started over there, and it started during the Jesuit Wars. It started during the time when the European kings were at war with the Jesuits. And so they were purging the Jesuits, and they were forcing the Pope to disband and dissolve the Jesuit order. Why? Because the Jesuit order was bypassing the kings of Europe and running businesses all over the world that were completely ignoring the king's territories and their sovereignty. Why? Because the Jesuits had total allegiance to the Pope. The Jesuits swore blind obedience to the Pope. They swore blind obedience to the Pope. The kings didn't. The kings had become over time more and more autonomous, seeking greater autonomy, particularly after the Protestant Reformation. But before that, and originally it was the Masonic lodges and the Masonic system that was practiced by the kings that was creating this new infrastructure where the kings were becoming more autonomous. And this is why the Jesuits infiltrated the Masonic order, took it over as the Illuminati, and then turned it into a program of regicide. Regicide. The killing of the kings. The killing of the kings. And this, of course, is what we saw in France during the French Revolution. So this is the groundwork of the KALERGI plan. This is Karl Marx. Karl Marx. Karl Marx was schooled by the Jesuits, and his group that came out of the Jesuit school in Germany was then used to start a revolution against the King of Prussia, the Prussian, I don't know what you call it, the King of Germany, 1848, the 1848 revolt. So obviously, Karl Marx was Jewish, and Karl Marx was a Jesuit, and Karl Marx was a communist, and Karl Marx was a Republican. See, these are all basically the same thing. These are all basically the same thing. So this is the background of the European Union. It has to do with the Jesuits. It has to do with Freemasonry. It has to do with the Jewish mafia. Has to do with republicanism and establishing a new order. Now, if you notice, one of the things about republicanism and about Karl Marx is the establishment of a central bank, a central banking system. And it was this central banking system that replaced the European aristocracy, the European monarchies. See, they replaced the European monarchies with a new aristocracy of the bankers, the Rothschild, Warburg, Schiff banking network. That became the new aristocracy. It was a Jewish banking cartels became the new aristocracy of the Jesuit system. Now, when Kalergi wrote his book about the European Union, the goal was to create this European Union. But how are you going to create a European Union when you have all these white people who are Christian and they have these ancestral ties to the land that go back, over 1,000 years? How are you going to teach them to abandon all that and go with this new thing? How are you going to tell them to go with this new thing? How are you going to convince them to do that? It's not going to be easy, right? So the plan was to bring people in from Africa and Asia and bring in Muslims and bring in Africans and bring them in as voting blocks. And so use these foreign people from foreign lands by bringing them into Europe and using them as foreign, absorbing them into Europe and using them to mix with the Europeans in order to bring about a new government. So the whole idea behind the European Union is to use foreign races to impose a new government on the European people. That's the entire program. Now, that's not what they were telling you the whole time. They were telling you it was because these are poor people and they're so poor. We need to help them. And the only way we can help them is we bring them into our capital cities and give them all the jobs and give them all these benefits and give them welfare and then buy them houses so that they can live. And then you live on the street and it's just this big replacement, right? The great replacement. So they weren't telling you that that's why they were doing it. But who is they and why are they doing it? They are this new order of political class that is trying to stay in power. And they can't stay in power, even though they're the same, they're white, right? So they're white people, but they can't stay in power under this program that they have with other white people. So the whole program is based on racial treason, right? The whole idea is I'm gonna commit treason against my race in order to stay as a political leader by bringing in a foreign population and telling them that all these people are racist and then using them as a battering ram against my own population. That is basically the Kalergi plan, and that's been the plan of the European Union. And that became also the plan here in the United States. That's what BLM is. That's what BLM is. That's what the civil rights movement of the 1960s was. Because if you notice, the founding fathers of America had this thing called natural rights. Natural rights, meaning these are rights that are natural, that come from God. And that would be the right to speak and the right to self-defense and the right to own property, because these are natural. The government doesn't give you a right to speak. The government doesn't give you a right to self-defense. The government didn't invent property ownership. These are things that occurred naturally, which means they come from God because they're natural. They're inherent. They're innate. They are innate rights. The civil rights movement of the 1960s was used to replace the natural rights that was codified by the founding fathers of America to give us a new concept of what it means to be an American, which means fighting racism. Became fighting racism, became the civil rights movement was about fighting white people. That became the whole thing, right? It was about fighting white people and integrating blacks and whites together in the schools and in the corporations, and everything was going to be race mixed, right? Because this was civil rights. These are rights that the government's going to give you, right? The government's going to provide the rights. That's not natural rights. Natural rights aren't provided by the government. They occur naturally, and they were codified in law by the founding fathers. So they replaced natural rights with a civil rights movement in the 1960s. But the KALERGI plan started in much earlier than that, after World War I. So this would be the 1920s into the 1930s. That's when the KALERGI plan was codified. And the codified plan after World War I, when they were trying to put together this new European system, and by they I mean the Rothschild Jesuit Jewish mafia system. I call it the Judeo-Jesuit syndicate because it's organized crime. But if you can't just think of it really as Jewish because it's so heavily Jesuit at the same time. So now let's just skip ahead to modern times. Why do I think about this? Well, you can't escape it now. You see, when I walk down the street and you see, let's just take the advertisements that you see everywhere in the media, in all types of media, whether it's a billboard or a poster or something on YouTube like a commercial, or a TV commercial, a Netflix commercial. What do you generally see? You see this type of social system promoted having to do with race mixing. It's in all the TV shows. Like I happened to see a television on over at, I was doing something, and there was a television on, and there was a show on about a British woman, a middle-aged British woman. It was some British television show. And in the show, it's all about her and what she's doing and all this kind of stuff. And part of the show is about how she's having an affair. And I just see this one scene, and like she's laying in bed in a nightgown with a black man, right? It's like, why would you put that in there? Why would you do that? It's just like, what are you doing? This is what they constantly promote in British television, in European television, in American television. They promote race mixing, they promote homosexuality, and they promote drug use also, big time. But those are the main things. They really, really push the race mixing, homosexuality, and drug use. And this has been going on since really the 1960s and before. But it just doesn't stop, right? Because this is the agenda for Europe. And it's also, I'd like to point out, it's not logical. It's not a logical agenda, right? It's not logical for, if you're trying to survive, those are not logical things to do. No person who wants to live, who wants to survive, would logically do those things. No race of people logically does that. If you look at the other races, none of them are promoting stuff like that, right? Because they don't want to, they're not suicidal. They're not suicidal, right? The Chinese race, the Korean race is not on a suicidal path of self-destruction. So when let's say you look at what China promotes to itself, and the U.S. government made a big deal of this with TikTok. Oh, the TikTok, they're promoting all this stuff. Well, it's not that TikTok is promoting it. The U.S. government has been promoting this since the 1960s. Actually, you've been doing this through Hollywood and through New York, and also through channels in Britain and Europe. But they made a big deal out of this because they wanted to take down TikTok, because TikTok was allowing information that was contrary to the agenda of Washington, D.C. But if you look at, I'm just giving an example. The Korean race is not suicidal. They're not trying to kill themselves. So if you look at what the government or the people in Korea promote to their own race, they don't promote race mixing, they don't promote drug use, and they don't promote homosexuality because they're not suicidal. They're not trying to kill themselves. They're not trying to die. They're not trying to destroy their civilization because they're not stupid. They're not stupid, and they're not brainwashed. The thing about this whole KALERGI program is, you know, the white race isn't stupid, but it has been totally brainwashed. All of Western Europe and America has been brainwashed. It's been a massive brainwashing operation with drugs and media. And a lot of, and also what's called trauma-based mind control. That's been a big part of the brainwashing. Trauma-based mind control, a term that I invented. I didn't invent the ideas behind it, but I invented that term specifically. And I'm glad it's being used. But I invented that term, just that term. That's all I'm saying. I just invented that term. I codified that term and made it popular on the internet. Trauma-based mind control. Now, people already had an idea what that was, but I just made that term so that people could use that and codify, so it could be understood very simply. So when you think of the KALERGI program, it's not just what they're doing and it's popular. It was forced on the people of Europe and America through brainwashing, through hardcore brainwashing. And so, because you figure this started in this program was written up in the 1920s, right after World War I, 1920s, 1930s. So now what happened? Who was KALERGI? KALERGI was a man connected to the Austrian government, which was we think of it as the Austrian aristocrats, but they were no longer a monarchy, really, because they were now republicans, right? And this is so there was something that's strange that happened in the 1800s, which is that the aristocrats switched over into republicanism, and then used republicanism to kill off and carry on this regicide, the murder, the eradication of the monarchies in Europe, and allied with, it appears, the Jesuits and the Pope. So they set up a new system. And the KALERGI was part of the system, and it was done through Freemasonry. So this was all carried out through Freemasonry. But Freemasonry, after a certain period of time in Europe, I'd say after the 1770s or 80s or 90s, somewhere around there, could no longer be thought of as separated from the Jesuits. It was no longer distinct from the Jesuits. It had been merged with the Jesuits. The Jesuits took over Freemasonry as the Illuminati. And it's funny because I remember back on Facebook years and years ago, there were some people promoting Freemasonry on Facebook. And I don't have a problem with Freemasonry if it was as it was originally intended. But there's this guy, and he was saying, he was promoting that he had become a Freemason, and he had all these pictures of him doing with his thing, with his apron and all this stuff. And he says, I'm a member of the Illuminati now. And I'm saying, and I told him, I go, you know that the Illuminati, that's a Catholic organization. You understand that, right? He didn't understand that. He didn't know what I was talking about. Right? I'm with the Illuminati. You're with the Illuminati. Okay. Well, that's a Catholic organization. Did you understand that? No, he doesn't understand that. All right. The Illuminati is a Catholic organization. Right. Those are Jesuits. Okay. The Illuminati is a Jesuit organization. Those are the people that took over the Masonic lodges. and then used it to overthrow the kings of Europe and kill them and bring in this new order where you have the central bankers as the new aristocracy, the Rothschild. That's why we now live under a Talmudo Jesuit system. The Jesuits promote race mixing, and the Pope Francis is a big and that was the whole BLM thing that we just lived through under Trump when they tried to take out Trump the first time, and they were doing all the riots and violence and burning down cities. That was the Jesuits. That was Black Lives Matter. That's a Jesuit movement. That's the Illuminati. That's Hollywood. That's CIA. So anyway, so Kalergi, the Kalergi plan is a plan to basically bring in a bunch of foreigners into Europe and into America and just dissolve the white races of Europe so that white races of Europe would not form political blocks that would then vote for politicians that represent them, and then that they would survive. So what I'm saying is the other races are, you can see, okay, as far as I was talking about trauma-based mind control. So what is trauma-based mind control? That is taking some horrifying incident and then promoting that to you through the media. So through all the major media channels, right? And then you see this horror, and then they give you the explanation. They give you the narrative that goes along with the horror, so that you buy into the narrative, and you don't want to. You want to stop the horror. You want to prevent the horror. You don't want to see that happen. So it's a way of changing you psychologically. It's a way of psychologically grabbing a hold of your thinking process so that you follow their narrative. So they come up with a narrative and they use images of horror or narratives of horror to then get you to buy into their program. An obvious example of this was what they did after World War II by claiming that the Germans made people into soap and made people into lampshades. Like that's an obvious example. It's claiming that Germans made people into human lampshades, right? So people saw these horrible images that were produced by people from Hollywood that went to Europe, and they showed bulldozers bulldozing bodies into pits during World War II. Now, where did all these dead bodies come from? They didn't say. They just made you assume that this was all caused by the Germans, right? And so this was a way to defame and black propaganda, right? This is a black propaganda campaign against the Germans. And so you would think that everything that the Germans did resulted in this, all these dead bodies being bulldozed into pits by the British bulldozer pilots that were driving the bulldozers and pushing the bodies into pits. And so you just assumed through the narration that they were giving you that this was all caused by the Germans just going around and killing people willy-nilly for no reason. When really, see, you understand something. In World War II, a lot of people died because it was World War II. Did the Germans try to prevent World War II? They in fact did. They tried to stop the war before it escalated by trying to make deals with the British. The British didn't want that because the British and America didn't want Germany controlling Europe. The British and Americans wanted to control Europe, so they couldn't allow Hitler to stay in power. They couldn't make any deals with Hitler. So they had to make deals with Stalin to attack from the east, and the U.S. and Britain were going to attack from the northwest and come into France and bomb the shit out of everything and have a giant war and get millions of people killed. That was the plan. Hitler did try to stop that plan, but he failed to stop it because he wasn't going to relinquish power over Europe. Because why should he? He's German. Why should the Germans give up Europe? I mean, have you seen a map of Europe? It's called Germany. Germany is the center of Europe. And that race of people comes from there. So why would they give it up to somebody from a foreign place? So anyway, let's not litigate that whole thing again. But so they had to blackmail, they had to slander and defame the Germans and use that and all the death from Europe from World War II to then brainwash the rest of the world for the rest of time, and so they could bring in this agenda. So they had to. They then took all the stuff. They took all the images of horror from the war, and then used that to brainwash Americans and the next generation of Germans and Europeans into hating everything about what the National Socialists tried to do, and siding with the Jews and the Jesuits and the Americans with this new agenda of race mixing and homosexuality and whatever, and drug use. That was the big thing. Everyone take drugs and be a pervert and race mix. That was the big agenda coming out of the end of World War II. So that is the KALERGI plan. The KALERGI plan is central to that, because race mixing is central to that, because if you couldn't get the white race to race mix with Africans and Muslims, then it would just keep going as it has for thousands of years, right? We would just keep being ourselves. We keep living our normal lives. Can't have that happening. Now, some people suggest that Hitler was a Jesuit, and they suggest this completely falsely. So I have to bring this up now. Anytime you go searching around the internet about the Jesuits, every single time, other than when you're talking to me, I'm the only person that's going to tell you the truth. They always bring up this concept that Hitler was a Jesuit, and that's the furthest thing from the truth. Hitler was not a Jesuit. Karl Marx was a Jesuit. Karl Marx was a Jesuit. Hitler wasn't a Jesuit. Karl Marx was a Jesuit. Why do they say that Hitler was a Jesuit? Because Hitler was Catholic, but that doesn't mean he was a Jesuit. That doesn't mean he was a Jesuit. What is a Jesuit? A Jesuit has blind allegiance to the Pope. The Jesuit order was created to have blind allegiance to the Pope because the kings of Europe were becoming more autonomous. So the Jesuit order was created with blind allegiance to the Pope. Now, did the National Socialists adopt that kind of an ideology towards Hitler? Yes, they did, which is why, if you're really stupid, you'll go around and say, Hitler was a Jesuit, because the government that Hitler set up was like what the Jesuits did by saying that the people were to have blind allegiance to Hitler. I don't think they had blind allegiance to Hitler, but in order to be a member of the leadership in the German government, you did have to have total allegiance to Hitler as the leader. So that part was adopted because it was a workable system that the Jesuits had created. You can't deny that blind allegiance works in maintaining a political system, because the Jesuits were in power and the Jesuits are still in power. The Jesuits are in power right now. Who runs? Well, the Jesuits, I don't know that they're in power right now because Donald Trump is the president, and I think that's become a problem for them, because who are the Jesuits? Joe Biden worked for the Pope. Lula in Brazil works for the Pope. The whole BLM thing was run by the Pope and the Jesuits. Gavin Newsom in California is a Jesuit. Trudeau is a Jesuit. Macron in France is a Jesuit. There's a whole Jesuit system. Media Matters is run by Jesuits, right? So the whole BLM LGBT system is run by Jesuits. People see the Jews. They can see the Jews. They can see the ADL. They can see the SPLC, but they can't see the Jesuits for some reason. They don't realize that it's really run by the Jesuits and that Karl Marx was a Jesuit, because it's so hard to pin down. It's a difficult thing to pin down unless you understand their ideology. But the ideology of the Jesuits is I mean, I'll look on their website. I'll just tell you, the ideology of the Jesuits is finding God in all things. It's not a Christian. It's not. See, Christianity is exclusive, right? Christianity is an exclusive ideology. It's not for everybody. Not everybody in Christianity. Not everybody finds God, right? Only those who worship Christ. Only those who follow the Logos. Those are the only ones that get to that find the true, that get to Theos, the Lord, right? The true God, Theos, known as Theos, right? The only way to get to Theos in Christianity is through the Logos, which is in the story of Christ. It's called Jesus Christ. It's called the Logos. Now, I believe that's an allegory. That's my personal belief. Okay, I believe that Theos is the truth. Theos is God, and that Logos is the way to God. So that the truth is the only way to God, and that allegory is explained in Christianity as Christ is the way to God, and that it's all written out that way as an allegory. That's my personal belief, and I've explained that in some of my other videos. So it's an exclusive. It's an exclusive type of religion, right? And so the Jesuits are not whatever actual Christianity is. That's not what the Jesuits are. The Jesuits, if you look at who's pushing all the weird pervert stuff in the society, there's two main groups pushing it: Jesuits and the Anti-Defamation League, and people associated with the Anti-Defamation League. And this is the cabal, this is the group that has been in charge or setting the agenda since the 1800s. It's been the Jesuits and this B'nai B'rith, which is the Anti-Defamation League. And so you just look at what are they pushing. The Anti-Defamation League pushes race mixing and homosexuality. What does the Jesuit order push? Race mixing and homosexuality. Right? That's their whole thing. There really isn't even much more to it. That's like their whole religion. Now with the Anti-Defamation League, there is a little bit more to it. Oh, because it's also a commercial operation for the Jesuits and the Anti-Defamation League. So for the Jesuits, all of the race mixing and homosexuality is used to control the politicians that push a certain agenda, which brings in lots of money. So it's a commercial. It's based on commercialism, which is based on capitalism. So the Jesuit order has always been based on commercialism and capitalism, and the B'nai B'rith ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, equally has always been based on commercial and capitalism. And those two organizations have always been working together, the Jesuits and the Anti-Defamation League, through Freemasonry. Through Freemasonry, including the control of the Christian churches, particularly in America, but also in Europe, starting with Rome. But in America, with people like Pastor Charles Taze Russell, who was the first Zionist pastor before the Zionist movement took hold with Herzl. Before Herzl, it was Charles Taze Russell. So anyway, we're talking about the KALERGI program, and so KALERGI was an Austrian, a member of the Austrian Habsburg government, and he was forced to flee Europe during World War II when Hitler came to power. When Hitler came to power, there were certain people that fled Europe. The communists in the Frankfurt School fled Europe and went to, I believe it was New York University or Columbia, one of the two. And then there was also the Coudenhoven-Kalergi group with Nicholas Kalergi fleeing Austria when Hitler came to power and unified Germany with Austria. The Kalergi group leaves Austria and goes to New York, where they are sponsored by the Rothschilds, and go and become part of the, I believe it was, I have to look it up. It's either New York University or Columbia, one of the two. And then there was another one, which was the libertarian. We always hear about that libertarian sector with Hillsdale College. But let's look up Kalergi in. We'll probably be able to look him up in Wikipedia. So it's Richard von Coudenhove-Kalergi. This is a Wikipedia entry. I just want to see what they have to say about this. Let's see what they have to say. My computer can handle looking things up right now. Let's see. It's going kind of slow. Here we go. Just about there. Hold on. Come on, it's just Wikipedia. You can handle it. It's just Wikipedia, computer. You can make it. My computer's so slow. I just closed a bunch of windows. Hopefully this will work. Am I still on? I'm still here. Is my computer going to work? Let's hope so. Okay, here we go. Richard von Coudenhove-Kalergi. This is a Wikipedia article, so they're guaranteed to hide a lot of this stuff because Wikipedia is an agent of B'nai B'rith, the Jesuit Order, the CIA, MI6, the European Union. By the way, my content is banned in Europe on Twitter. Well, I'm not even on Twitter anymore. But I mean, literally, my content was flagged by the European Union, and I was kicked off of. I was blocked from being able to access. My posts were blocked in Europe. So I guarantee you, whatever is on Wikipedia isn't going to tell you what I'm telling you. But let's see what it does say. Richard Nicholas Coudenhove-Kalergi, 16 November 1894 to 27 July 1972. Okay, so he was born in 1894 and he died in 1972. Pioneer of European integration. He served as the founding president of the Pan-European Union for 49 years. His father was an Austrian-Hungarian diplomat, and his mother was a Japanese daughter of an oil merchant, antiques dealer and major landowner in Tokyo. Okay, so he was part Japanese and part Austrian. So anyway, it's going to say personal philosophy. He was aristocratic in his origins, and this reflected his ideas. Blah, blah, blah. He was a pan-European political activist. Right. Pan-European political activist. This is what I'm talking about. But they're not going to tell you the whole story here. His pan-Europeanism earned vivid loathing from Adolf Hitler, who excoriated its pacifism and mechanical economicism. Okay, whatever. So it says his pan-Europeanism earned vivid loathing from Adolf Hitler. So why would Hitler hate his version of pan-Europeanism? Right? Wasn't Hitler setting up a new Reich in Europe? Hitler was. Hitler was attempting to set up a federation in Europe, right? Under the German government. But what Coudenhove-Kalergi was trying to do was something totally different, working with the Rothschilds and the Americans and the Jesuits to set up this other thing by bringing in foreign races into Europe to keep their network in power. You see the difference. So before, let me just explain this to you. Before we got this information out to people used to believe, all the conspiracy tards on the internet used to go around telling everyone that that all of this stuff, that the World Trade Center and the One World Order and the United Nations and globalism, that this was all run by a secret Nazi conspiracy, and that the Germans really won World War II. This is all garbage. This is all garbage. This was promoted by Alex Jones and people on the internet, people that I like. Okay, Alex Jones promoted this garbage. Bill Cooper promoted this garbage. I like Bill Cooper, but he promoted this garbage. My friend Jordan Maxwell, who I like, he promoted this garbage. So they just all promoted this thing because they just assumed that there was everything, that Nazis were behind this. They didn't understand it. And even though people like Jordan Maxwell would talk about the Jesuits, he didn't know this either. Bill Cooper didn't understand this. Bill Cooper knew a lot, but he didn't understand it. It's not the Nazis. It's not the Nazis. The Nazis aren't the ones that won World War II. The Nazis didn't do this. Now, why were some Nazis brought into the CIA? Why were some Nazis brought into NATO? Why were Nazis brought into the United Nations? Why? Because after World War II, there were certain people that had agreed to join this new thing, which was all run by their enemies, the people that had just bombed their country. So there's always people that are going to abandon their ideals or abandon their agenda and go with the enemy. That's all that happened. So it's not like, oh, the Nazis, now they're running NASA. No, they sold out to NASA, and they sold out to the United Nations, and they sold out to the CIA. That's all that happened. They just sold out. There was no future for them left in Germany, so they sold out. They sold out to NATO. Because if you look at what the agenda of NATO is, as stated by its founder, I can't remember, it was a British guy who said, and you can look up the quote, the purpose of NATO was to keep the Americans in, to keep the Russians out, and to keep the Germans down. To keep the Germans down. So literally the goal of NATO since its inception was to keep the Germans down, to keep the Americans in, and to keep the Russians out. So it wasn't a Nazi agenda. Then how could it be a Nazi agenda to keep the Germans down? That doesn't make any sense. And so yeah, there have been people that were formerly with the National Socialist Party. Now they're working for NATO to keep the Germans down, to keep the Americans in. Well, that wasn't the agenda of the National Socialist government. So that's why all that kind of stuff is just nonsense. That's one example. And so anyway, what else does it say about the KALERGI plan? Anyway, the Holocaust Encyclopedia. This should be interesting. Oh, I can't even access that one. Holocaust KALERGI. Let's look it up. Oh, I know what I should look up. We should look up Hillsdale College. Check this out. You know, like if you're ever online, you see these Hillsdale College ads, and who is the name? I got to find the name of that Wikipedia. I got to go Wikipedia. Oh, here we go. Let's see if I can find the information I'm looking for on Wikipedia. The history of Hillsdale College, right? What's that guy's name? In 1861, many Hillsdale students joined the ranks of the Union Army during the American Civil War. Okay, the Union Army run by communists, by Marxists. But that's not the part that I was going to try and show you. Who is that? Who's the libertarian? Who's the libertarian that's associated with Hillsdale College? Oh, Mises, the Mises Institute. That's what it is. The Mises. Mises and right. Mises. This is the part I was interested in. So Mises and KALERGI were both Austrian and both fled Germany and were both it says Mises immigrated from Austria to the United States in 1940, fleeing from Nazis, who on the first day the German army entered Vienna, rushed into the von Mises apartment in Vienna, apparently looking for him, and confiscated his library and papers. So the enemies of Germany were Mises and also KALERGI. This is the basis of libertarianism. So this is what I'm trying to point out. Libertarianism and communism are two sides of the same coin. That doesn't make sense to you, right? You're like, how could that be? Communism is totalitarianism. Libertarianism is the opposite. How could they be working together? They're working together because if you notice, the communists push race mixing, right? Particularly in America. Let's I don't know about let's forget about Stalin, whatever Stalinism. That may have been a little bit different. But let's take the communist system pushed by the bankers, Schiff, and the Republican Party and the Rothschilds, okay, and Karl Marx, right? Race mixing, central banking. So if you notice, like, let's just take America since the 1960s. On one side, you've got the left, right? And they're pushing race mixing and integration with socialism. And then on the right, you've got libertarianism, and they're pushing race mixing and integration with free markets that are run by the bankers, the central bankers, right? The free markets run by the Federal Reserve Bank. And that's on one side. And then on the other side, you have socialism, communism, pushing race mixing and integrating and collectivization. So now who fled Europe? It was the communists, and it was the KALERGI group, and it was the Mises group. Fled Austria. And they went to they fled to New York. They fled to New York University, it says here. Mises received honors throughout the course of his lifetime, honorary doctorates from Grove City College, New York University, and the University of Freiburg in Germany in 1964. So that was after the war. So it says Ludwig von Mises. So why am I bringing him up? The reason I'm bringing this up is because you think that the communists and the libertarians, the von Mises libertarians, Austrian economics, that these people are opposed. They are opposed, but they're also connected. These are the two wings of the same bird. This is why in U.S. politics that they were pushing on the left, they're pushing socialism and the Bernie Sanders type of socialism and the Bill Clinton type of socialism, which isn't really hardcore stuff, but they would use the hardcore left when they needed to, right? They would use the Antifa, the anarchists, the violent far left. So the far left communists are there as the enforcers of the agenda, right? It's always the way it's always been. They never let them really run anything, but they do use them to enforce the agenda on the streets through violence. So that was BLM, Antifa, that type of stuff. But that keeps this other group in power, which includes the von Mises and the libertarians, right? You look at, let's give you an example. J.D. Vance, libertarian, race mixing, libertarianism. That whole Dan Bongino, Larry Elder, Dennis Prager, Mark Levin, Ben Shapiro. See how it's all mixed in with the libertarian wing? Now, that doesn't mean they're card-carrying libertarians, although Larry Elder was. And you look at the whole thing with Palantir and JD Vance, right? So you've got the techies, right? With people like Elon Musk. Now, let me just say, I like what Elon Musk is doing as far as getting rid of all the waste, fraud, and abuse in the government. When I saw Donald Trump's meeting that he had the other day with his cabinet meeting, I was very impressed. These to me look like people who genuinely care about the country and about the government and care about America, and genuinely good people who want to help America. That's what I see when I look at that. I don't think they're bad people. It's just that I understand what the agenda is, whereas they don't. See, as much as I appreciate what Elon Musk is doing to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse in the government, he took me off of X. I'm not allowed to communicate on X. Why? Because I oppose his something or another. That, see, he purged me and a bunch of other people like me from X on Christmas. That was our Christmas gift from X, was being purged off the internet. It was a massive purge. Who did he purge? He purged me and a bunch of other people that know about the KALERGI plan. What did he, you know, and then what happens? Then he's having his whole businesses are all being attacked by the far left. Now, I put out a bunch of videos saying that we should take out Elon Musk's businesses, and I put these out back in December, right after he purged me from X. But I'm not the one that was interested in committing violence. I was just using my voice because I was angry that he took me off of his platforms. Why did he take me off his platforms? This is the stupidity of the whole libertarianism thing, right? They're so tied in with people like Ben Shapiro and the core of the Zionist group over there, that it muddies their thinking. They don't have the logos. They haven't totally embraced the logos, logic, reason. He purged me from Twitter or X. He purged the Groypers. He purged a bunch of right-wing Catholics. I'm not Catholic, but he purged a bunch of right-wing Catholics from Twitter, the Groypers, and others for being racist, I guess. Just being racist, not actually violating any of the rules, but just having racist opinions that he didn't like or that disagreed with his libertarian agenda. That's what I'm talking about. So here's the best way to think of this group. Notice how they love to say, well, I'm being attacked by the right and the left. See, I'm being attacked by the right. Attacked? Who are the right-wing people that are burning down your Tesla dealerships? Nobody. You're being attacked by Antifa, who are backed by this cult. Right? They're allowed to do that because they're backed by the cult. We're not going around, we on the right who are, quote, attacking you are disagreeing with you. So they call that being attacked. They're attacking me from the right. No, we're disagreeing with you. We're trying to reason with you. We're trying to reason. We're trying to explain to you what's really going on. Right? And you want to side with this other group that's actually the problem. And by the problem, I mean the mafia. The mafia is the problem, right? We're being very outspoken and direct about who they are and what they're doing and the crimes that they're committing. But you have to keep siding with them. So this gets to the core of the problem. The KALERGI program is a program of race mixing Europeans systematically to eradicate them for political power, to remain in power. This is why they've been bringing in Haitians into places like Ohio. One, because they get the cheap labor. Two, because they stay in power politically and financially, because the white races get diminished in their power. The people that live there in Ohio, all the white people living there, now they have to compete with a foreign race that was brought in by the ruling class. So now I was just, so this is the whole thing with that I just saw on Jimmy Dore. I just want to show you something. So Jimmy Dore, I like his show, right? I like watching Jimmy Dore. He's got a lot of good stuff. But this is why the left and the left wing is so basically undependable, unreliable, ultimately should be ignored. Why they're ultimately so foolish in their political agenda. So Jimmy Dore, he's got this guy on because talking about Ireland. And so, yeah, ruling class broke Ireland and point the finger at immigrants. So here's Jimmy Dore has this guy on his show, right? And he's an Irish comedian or something. So here they
a government who's
here's
I would say that straight off the bat. But and I'm also wouldn't be in the business of ridiculing people on the right. I know I'm a big fan of your show, and I've heard people talking about that before. If people have grievances about what's going on in Ireland, I think they should definitely be listened to. But in my view, I suppose I'd be quite left-leaning. We have a ruling class problem. We don't have an immigration problem here.
You do have an immigration problem. This is what this guy doesn't understand. And I guess this is what Jimmy Dore doesn't understand either. The immigration plan is caused by the ruling class. Like the immigration problem that the right wing is saying, we have an immigration problem. We're saying they're bringing immigrants in to replace us and kill us, to use them as a block, a political block against us so that they can remain in power. The whole reason why there's immigrants in Ireland, in London, in Europe, and in America is so that they have a group of people that's not the Americans and not the Canadians and not the Irish and not the Germans or the French, that they have this other population that keeps them in power. That's the KALERGI plan. Let's listen. I just want you to hear this fool again here.
Guy, I would say that straight off the bat. But and I'm also wouldn't be in the business of ridiculing people on the right. I know I'm a big fan of your show, and I've heard people talking about that before. If people have grievances about what's going on in Ireland, I think they should definitely be listened to. But in my view, I suppose I'd be quite left-leaning. We have a ruling class problem. We don't have an immigration problem here in Ireland. We have a government who's proven to be completely inept, and a government which is really slow to consult people when immigrants are coming into certain areas of the country and in small towns. But to say that we're being overrun by immigrants, it's just the age-old argument that people on the right, I think, are very fond of and are fed, that the idea that, you know, it's somehow the immigrants' fault that people are out of work and that services don't work in Ireland. The reason...
Oh my God, see, this is so frustrating. This is so stupid. The ruling class brings in the immigrants to kill you, dummy. That's what's happening. That's what's been happening the whole time. And this is why the left is so foolish, is that they want to have some alliance with the immigrants. They want to have an alliance with the refugees against the ruling class. Dummy. The ruling class brought them in, you idiot. The ruling class brought them in to kill you. And now you're going to form an alliance with them. Do you see how stupid this is? Now, this happens both on the right with the libertarianism, if you want to call that the right. These terms right and left are pretty stupid. So the libertarians do this. The Republicans do this. The left communists do this. They're always trying to form alliances with the refugees, with the blacks, with the foreigners, against whoever the ruling class is. This is a really strange problem that we have in Europe and also in America. So if you notice, you listen to Hillsdale College or the libertarian media, they're like, it's not the problem of the immigrants, it's the problem of communism. And if they're just not communists, then it's all going to be fine. Well, it's not fine. Because the thing is, you want to be able to perpetuate your own culture and your own race, just like everybody else on the earth does, right? You've been convinced that you shouldn't perpetuate your own race for some reason. And a lot of this reasoning started with the Holocaust, museums pushed all across Europe, pushed all across America by the US government. And and the European Union and the whole group that formed out of that. So the whole idea has been pushed that you shouldn't perpetuate your own race and that you shouldn't perpetuate your own kind and that you should get involved in this integration race mixing, and then you'll have a communist wing of race mixers and a socialist wing of race mixers and religion mixers and a libertarian wing of race and religion mixers. And so that's why with republicanism, like J.D. Vance type of republicanism, you're still going to get race mixing. You're still going to get religion mixing. We're not, see, give you an example. The Republicans aren't trying to abolish Islam, for example. They're just saying, I don't even know what they're saying. What are they saying? Why should you have, okay, look, if you're white or if you're European and you're Christian, then why shouldn't you just replicate your own culture? Ta-da! That's all I'm saying. Why do something else? Whose idea is it to do something else? It's the Jesuits. It's the Jesuits, and it's the groups associated with them, like the Jewish Mafia, like the Republican Party, like the Democrat Party, like the Labor Party, like the Tories. They're all pushing the same thing. They're all pushing race and religion mixing. And this has all been happening since the rise of the Jesuit order. So the Jesuit order, which took over Freemasonry and brought all this about, European Union, all this stuff, they believe that that God is found in all things. So let's see. I'm just going to type this in. God in all things, Jesuit. God in all things. Here we have finding God in all things is a core principle of Ignatian spirituality, a Jesuit concept emphasizing that God is present and can be found in all aspects of life. All aspects of life. From the mundane to the extraordinary, encouraging attentiveness and reverence for the world around us. Finding God in all things. So that means finding God in, let me give you an example. When Muhammad was raping Aisha, the 9-year-old girl, can you find God in that? Can you find God in that? When the Prophet Muhammad was raping a 9-year-old named Aisha, according to the texts of Islam, you see God, where's God? You can find God in that? Because I don't see God in that. Because see, for me, the only way to God is the Logos. You see how exclusive that is? It's very exclusive. It's very exclusive. So I don't find God in that. And so in the Jesuit system, they find God in all things. When you see Dave Rubin and his homosexual husband, is that what it's called? Adopting a baby. They pay a woman to have a baby, and then they take the baby. So they basically buying a baby from out of a womb. Do you see God in that? Can you find God in that? You see, where's God? Where's God in that? I don't see it because I'm not a Jesuit. You see, because I love and I worship the Logos. I worship the Logos. I worship the Logos. The Logos is reason. The Logos is truth. The only way to Theos, the only way to God is the Logos. It's exclusive. It's exclusive. It's not there. It's not that. See what that is that's an absence of God. It's an absence of God. So the entire Jesuit system is based on some kind of false ideology. See, that's an absence of God because it's an absence of reason and it's an absence of logic. Now, the Jesuits during Trump's first term from 2015 to 2020, when he ran in 2015, he was elected, became president in 2016, there was a big movement of racial violence by the Jesuit order and the Black Lives Matter group, which was all backed by the Jesuit order, the FBI, the CIA, and those are the main groups in America pushing racial violence, massive racial violence, and terrorism, and murder, and crazy stuff. I mean, it was bad, right? That was all done in order to maintain the Jesuit system, which is race mixing, and Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and Gavin Newsom in California and Justin Trudeau in Canada and Macron in France and the whole network of Media Matters and their whole group out of Washington, D.C., the European Union, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the alliance with the Jewish mafia in Ukraine, the alliance with the Anti-Defamation League. What am I saying? When they were going around burning and killing, that was all backed by the Jesuits. That was all backed by the Jesuits, who find God in all things. All the homosexuality and the gay marriage, that's all backed by the Jesuits. That's the Jesuits. That's a Jesuit ideology. No other race on earth has ever had this theme. Okay, let me explain something to you. No other race on earth would ever have two men getting married and adopting babies. Nobody would do that. The only people that do that, the only people that push that are the Jesuits as an institution. The Jesuits push that. And their affiliated organizations, the Anti-Defamation League, B'nai B'rith. No one else on earth would ever do that. No one else on earth would ever even consider that. It's so anti-logic. It's anti-logos. It's suicidal, right? So, so the Jesuit order is the group pushing that with the Anti-Defamation League. It's hard for me to know who's in charge. Is it the Jewish mafia or is it the Pope? I tend to think it's the Jewish mafia, but I don't know. I mean, it's all connected with the Jesuits for some reason. It's hard for me to really distinguish between those two. But so here's an example with Jimmy Dore of these leftists, right? The leftists are the left. If you follow the left groups, like Jimmy Dore is having this guy and saying, well, it's not the immigrants. They're not the problem. Well, they're in Ireland. So that's the problem. See, the problem is the politicians can't stay in power without the immigrants. Without the immigrants keeping them in power, the politicians are out. The whole idea behind the revolution gets of changing the leadership in the government gets destroyed by bringing in the immigrants, because now the immigrants keep it going, and then they just eradicate the white populations of Ireland, and they eradicate the white populations of Germany, and they have BLM in Germany, right? They have Black Lives Matter in Germany and Black Lives Matter in London, right? It's all backed by the Jesuits. And the Freemason angle, which gets hyped up a lot, actually is probably the least important. It's probably the least important. It was used as a vehicle after it was taken over by the Illuminati, but Freemasonry itself is the least of the thing. The real powers behind the conspiracy against Europeans and against Christianity, because let me explain this to you again. The Pope is a Jesuit. The Jesuits push this idea. I'm going to go back to this thing. God in all things. Jesuits, finding God in all things, the Society of Jesus. Well, that's not Jesus. You're literally not following Jesus if you're finding God in all things. But notice how this is the ideology of the New Age kind of ideology. The New Age ideology is that you can find God in all things, that all roads lead to God. And so Muhammad, as an example, I'm going to use Muhammad as an example, raped a 9-year-old. And according to the Jesuits, that's perfectly legitimate. That's fine. And the Jesuit Pope is bringing in Muslims into Europe. And you're thinking, well, why would they do that? Because that's their thing. That's what they do. And you're thinking, but that's crazy. That's suicidal. That's going to get us all killed. Yes, that's their religion. That's the Jesuit system. And they've got big money behind it because it's good for capitalism. It's good for commercialism. It's the agenda of commercialism. Maybe that's what it really boils down to. It's like a codified system of commercialism. And that the Jesuit order, maybe it didn't even start this way. Maybe it just evolved into this thing. I don't know. But it is what it is now. And it is what it's been since the Revolutionary War in 1776. It's been connected to commercialism the whole time. So that means it's connected to capitalism, which means it's connected to capital groups, which since the 17 and 1800s is the Rothschild Warburg network. So it's commercialism, and that is, I guess that's what it boils down to. The core of this problem is commercialism and capitalism, which formed into a religious ideology. So out of capitalism came a religion, the Jesuit system, race mixing, and all the perversions and all the basically what it comes down to is there is no logos because there is no discernment. There is no distinguishing. You can't distinguish. And because you can't distinguish, you can't separate things out according to race, according to religion, according to tradition. You can't distinguish anything. Everything has to be mixed. This is the commercialism that took over the Jesuit order and took over the Vatican and runs the whole system. And so now in America, we're at an interesting place because we started this whole movement of exposing the KALERGI plan in order to bring back distinction, that the races should be able to survive, the white races of Europe should be able to survive, and that Christianity should be able to survive in a pure form. And so this is the opposite. So it's almost you have a war between the logos and what would you call the anti-logos? I don't know, the darkness, ignorance. But anyway, there's a conflict there. And on one side, the commercialism of the Jesuit system. Why was the Jesuit system involved in commercialism? Because the kings of Europe were in control of their territories, which means they were in control of the commercial enterprises going on in their territories. And as they became more autonomous from the Pope needed an order which was going to be completely have complete blind obedience to the Pope so that the money would go to the Vatican. The commercial enterprises around the world would be carried out on behalf of the Vatican. And this is why, if you look at what happened in Asia, where the Jesuits were operating in Asia and East Asia, people, I guess, I haven't looked into it super deep, but I just know that there were these suggestions that the Jesuits would just say, well, the things that you do in all of your traditions, that's the same as what we're doing. And we'll just merge it with Christianity. So what happened apparently is that instead of trying to change the people through converting them to a different ideology, they would just say that their existing ideology is the same as the Jesuit system. And so there was this just kind of absorbing everybody into the Jesuit system and merging the Jesuits with all these other traditions and races and different stuff. And they did this for commercial reasons so that they could run the commercial enterprises in these different zones around the world and then get that money back to flowing into the Vatican, to maintain the system in the Vatican. That's kind of how it started. That's how it started. And so now we have this ideology that you find God in all things. It's a Jesuit system. Here's this James Martin guy who's like a hardcore sodomite, promoted by the Catholic Church, promoted by the Vatican as in the Jesuit order, with all the Hollywood people and stuff. So that's what you have. So when you look at Hollywood, I'm going to have to wrap this up. When you look at Hollywood, you look at all the garbage coming out of Hollywood. Everybody can see that there's Jewish people there. And so they blame the Jewish mafia. And they're not wrong to do that because there is a Jewish mafia there running everything. You've got all the big major studios and you've got all these Jewish mafia groups and they're connected to the Epstein network and they're connected to Harvard University with Les Wexner and they're connected to New York and they're connected to the Mossad, and you've got Mossad agents literally running around all over the media promoting the Mossad agenda and stuff. But it's all done with the Jesuits, and there's some kind of a syndicate there. And if you don't understand that there is a syndicate there, you can just see that one part of it. But just to wrap this up, that's why what you see in Hollywood, that's what you see in the media, that agenda through the CIA, through the 1960s, with the civil rights movement, the integration movement, the drug proliferation movement of LSD, and through the music, through the Jimi Hendrix and the Beatles and Janis Joplin and all these people that are overdosing on drugs, because what did you get hit with, through the, I grew up in the 1970s and 80s. There were drugs in the schools, all the music, right? The whole idea was you listen to the music. It's all about the drugs and Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and Jimi Hendrix and the Doors, right? The Doors and Pink Floyd, right? You're all supposed to listen to the music and take the drugs. And this takes you, this is the path that was established for you by the Jesuit system through the CIA in America. And this is where it led to. It led to the eradication of the populations of America and Europe. So at the center of that, you definitely have the Jesuit order. You have the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith. You have the commercial enterprises of the Jesuit order, which includes the banking houses. So it's really a commercial, it's a commercial / religious system. The religious angle, you think it's secular. It's not. It's the Jesuits. The Jesuits secularized their system to make it integrated into the commercial system. So all the commercialism that you see is, you notice there's like a meme. There's a meme in all the commercials. There's a message in all the commercials. That message is about race mixing and integration and religion mixing. And that's the Jesuit meme. That's the Jesuit that's the Jesuit commercial communication that's being communicated to you in every commercial that you see, in every advertisement that you see. And it's in all the mouths of the politicians. All the mouths of the politicians. Every single one. It's the Jesuit thing. So that's why they got rid of Rhodesia and they got rid of South Africa. And then they got rid of, first they got rid of the South in America. They used communists to fight the South. Then they got rid of, and then they established their new order of the new Marxist system in Washington, D.C. of fighting racism. And then they brought in the civil rights movement to replace the natural rights movement. And then they expanded that with two major wars to make sure they had control over Europe. And then they got rid of, and then once they got control of Europe, got rid of the Germans, then they imposed the CIA drug perversion race mixing agenda. And then they got rid of South Africa, and then they got rid of Rhodesia, and then here we are, and then they've got BLM running down, burning everything. There's no end to this unless you put an end to it. Unless you divorce yourself from that system, there is no end to it. The end is, they're just like you. When I watch MSNBC and they've got this weird fat black guy with this weird white afro, and he sounds like a homosexual, and he's talking about his political agenda. It's like, this is crazy. This is crazy. It's crazy that anyone goes along with this. And so what I'm saying is you have to identify whose agenda it is, whose memes are they repeating? It's the Jesuits. And the Jesuits is a commercial religious system, and it's tied in with the Jewish mafia, which is B'nai B'rith, the Anti-Defamation League. That's why they're all pushing the same thing. And so that's what they're doing, and that doesn't have to be what you're doing. You should do something different. You should do something that actually replicates your own religion into the future, perpetuates your own culture, perpetuates your own religion. And I should make another video about that, what I believe that should be, because at the core of this has to be an ideology that you agree with and a system that you would want to perpetuate. Because when you have the Jesuits running everything, there's nothing to perpetuate. You have this big commercial race mixing, religion mixing enterprise that is just perpetuating itself through that. And that doesn't really benefit anybody else. So I'm going to wrap up this video, and I have to make another one on what the core ideology is. And I already know what it is. It's basically the core ideology, which you should perpetuate, is the truth. The truth. And the truth that comes from God, which I call theos, which the Greeks called theos. Anyway, end of video.